Welcome back, America. We're here with Dan Hoffman, Fox News contributor, former CIA station chief. Now, Dan Hoffman, President Trump seems to me to have really pulled off a brilliant move here. He's gotten NATO to increase their contributions to their own defense, 5%. Nobody thought that was possible. They weren't even paying 2%. Then he gets them to purchase equipment, military equipment from us in order to give Ukraine because Ukraine desperately needs it. What do you make of all this?
Well, I think that it's important that Europe has skin in the game. After all, this is Europe's backyard. Now, make no mistake, the security of Europe is in our national security interest as well. We enjoy $1 trillion worth of trade with Europe. The last thing we need is for Russia to conquer Ukraine, install a puppet regime, and cast their shadow over the rest of Europe. But Europe needs to step up with their own defense of their own continent, and that's what this deal is doing. It's a pipeline. The United States is the arsenal of democracy, something we've been doing since the Second World War. Europe will purchase this equipment, the munitions, the air defense, and get it to Ukraine, and that's actually an excellent solution to the challenge that we face.
You know, I look at this, and then I want to talk about Ukraine and Russia's role, but I look at this, the President of the United States also works out a deal with Ukraine for raw materials, which we desperately need. So he really brings a rare and unique perspective to this, doesn't he? He's not an isolationist, but he's not an interventionist. He uses a lot of common sense. He sees what the Russians, what Putin is doing to Kiev, their other cities they have, despite the fact that he's trying to get them to negotiate some kind of a ceasefire. He looks at Ukraine and he says, look, no more blank checks. We can't afford it anymore. We want access to your raw materials. I mean, have you ever seen anybody like this?
Well, I think what the president and his team are doing is trying to draw lessons learned from U.S. foreign policy during this century. So here's what the president's not doing. We're not going into the Middle East with 200,000 troops to try to do regime change. We are absolutely enforcing or projecting U.S. power in the region to suit our national security interests, but in limited scope to achieve what we want. And there's an economic issue at stake here with the mineral deal, as you said, and then the supply of military arms to Ukraine so they can stay in the fight and continue to fight for their independence. Look, the war could end right now if Vladimir Putin would call off his barbaric attacks on Ukraine. And the president gave Putin every chance to do that, and he hasn't. And so that's the reason why I think we're following this line of policy.
How stable is Putin in terms of his power there? I mean, is he moving around players? Is he worried about some military general? Is he worried about an assassination attempt? How stable is he? Because there's an awful lot of dead Russians.
There are. And look, autocracies, dictatorships by their very nature are brittle. And look, it wasn't just very recently, last couple of years, when we had that mutiny and attempted coup from the head of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin. Putin has to be concerned because his war is a failure, resulting in reportedly 1 million casualties. Finland and Sweden are now NATO members. As you mentioned, NATO is now spending, NATO members, most of them up to 5%. That's what they're pledging. They've been awakened from their post-Cold War slumber, and we've got United States leadership on the world stage to help make all of that happen. There's been a brain drain from Russia, roughly 1 million Russians, and Putin is groveling to North Korea, China, and Iran for the military assistance and economic support he needs to carry on the war. But Putin's objective was to overthrow the government of Ukraine and install a puppet regime. He's failed at that. And no one knows it better than his own security services and military. I spent years at CIA trying to see the world through the twisted KGB eyes of Vladimir Putin, recruiting spies and stealing secrets. I can tell you that the guys in Putin's inner circle, they know full well what Putin has done to their country, and that does put Putin at risk from his own people, potentially.
When we come back, the president had also said, look, you have 50 days, now it's less than 50 days, to have a ceasefire. And he said, we're going to put these secondary tariffs in place 100%. Can Putin's economy handle this when the United States of America does that, and now Iran, less so, is able to provide it with oil and drones and so forth? Curious to know your answer. We'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.